Hashtag the new financial rails, why the real story happens below the token price. The token price is noisy. Influencers argue. Charts move. People are looking for the next multiple. But most of the real story often happens below. Not in price. But in the rails. In the wallet. In the execution layer. In liquidity. In settlement. In custody. In how cheaply, safely, and clearly capital can travel from one participant in the system to another. Yesterday we talked about how money becomes software. Today is the next layer. If money becomes software, it needs new financial rails. This is where the real infrastructure battle begins. Hashtag fresh signal. Ethereum through EIP 7702 moves regular accounts closer to smart account logic. The idea is not for a person to manually sign one primitive transaction each time. The idea is different. Batching. Sponsored transactions. Delegated permissions. Limits. Signed actions. More normal wallet UX. Base account moves in the same direction at the user level. Passkeys, sponsored transactions, spend permissions, batch operations, payments, and identity without the old pain of seed phrases and constant gas. L2 Beat shows that the L2 ecosystem is no longer a theory. Rollups, validiums, app chains, proof systems, activity, secured value, and risk profiles. Uniswap v4, through hooks, transforms liquidity pools from fixed AMM mechanisms into a programmable infrastructure where you can change the behavior of the pool at specific stages. Circle CCTP transports USDC between networks via native burn and mint, reducing reliance on wrapped assets, fragmented liquidity, and legacy bridging logic. Chainlink CCIP builds cross-chain messaging and programmable token transfers, where an asset transfer can not just move from A to B, but bring with it instructions for action on another network. This is not just news. This is the map of the new financial stack. User. Wallet. Execution. Liquidity. Settlement. Custody. Compliance. And if even one layer is weak, the entire system feels like a complex engineering toy rather than a global financial infrastructure. Hashtag what are financial rails? Rails is not an application. Not a token. Not a pretty site. Rails are the path along which capital moves without unnecessary friction. The old financial system was also a system of rails. Banks. Card networks. SWIFT. Clearing. Brokers. Custodians. Exchanges. Regulators. Reporting. It was slow, but it knew the main thing. Fix ownership. Carry out calculations. Share responsibility. Work with risk. Regain trust through institutions. The new system tries to do the same thing, but faster, more programmable and more global. But it needs to pass the same exam. Not, can I send a token? A. Is it possible to send value safely? Can this be done cheaply? Is it possible to make this understandable to humans? Is it possible to recover from an error? Is it possible to build compliance? Can it prove that settlement actually happened? Is it possible to trust this with a business process, and not just an experiment? This is the question of financial rails. Hashtag first layer, wallet ceases to be a wallet. The old crypto wallet was a blunt instrument. You have a seed phrase. You have a private key. You sign the transaction. Wrong, lost. Press the wrong button and you lose funds. Give approval to the wrong contract and you lose funds. This was not mass market financial infrastructure. It was the cockpit of an airplane without a pilot. Smart account logic changes this. Wallet is becoming more than just a storage place. It becomes the policy layer. You can combine actions into one transaction. You can pay for gas per user. You can give an app limited permission. You can sign not everything, but a specific action. You can set a spending limit. You can connect passkey. You can remove some of the technical pain from the interface. And this is much more important than it seems. Because mass financial infrastructure doesn't start with a fancy blockchain. It begins from the moment a person stops being afraid to press a button. ## second layer, execution becomes cheaper. If every action is expensive, the network does not become everyday infrastructure. It remains an expensive settlement layer for those who already understand why they should pay. Therefore, L2 is not just another network. L2 is an attempt to move most of the execution to where operations are cheaper and faster, but at the same time maintain connection with the base settlement layer. Rollups collect a lot of actions, publish data or commitments, use fraud proofs or validity proofs, and try to give the market a compromise. Cheaper than mainnet. Faster for the user. But not completely divorced from the Ethereum security model. That's why it's important to look beyond TVL. You need to look at the proof system. Stage. Data availability. Sequencer risk. Withdrawal risk. Upgrade keys. Operational assumptions. L2 is not magic. This is an engineering compromise. And a good infrastructure investor should look not at the slogan fast and cheap, but at where exactly the risk is hidden. ## third layer, liquidity becomes programmable. DEX used to be quite simple. There is a pool. There is liquidity. There is a swap. There is a price curve. There is a fee. But Uniswap v4 shows a different path. Through hooks, the liquidity pool can receive additional logic. The pool can behave in different ways. You can change the fee model. You can add custom mechanics before swap or after swap. You can build new DeFi protocols on top of the liquidity pool, and not next to it. This is an important shift. Because liquidity is no longer just money in the pool. It becomes a programmable environment. Liquidity is starting to have behavior. And when liquidity has behavior, DeFi becomes more like a financial operating system rather than a collection of individual casino tables. But here again there is a risk. The greater the programmability, the greater the attack surface. More hooks. More custom logic. More errors. More unknown consequences. New financial rails must not only be flexible, they must be verifiable. ## fourth layer, settlement between networks. The weakest point of the multi-chain world is fragmentation. One asset here. Another wrapped asset is there. Liquidity pool on one network. Bridge to another. The user does not understand where the real asset is. Business does not want to keep the risk in an unclear bridge. The institutional player does not want to build a separate infrastructure for each network. This is why CCTP and CCIP are important as an infrastructure class. CCTP tries to solve one specific problem, how to move USDC between networks through native burn and mint, and not through a wrapped version and not through large liquidity pools. CCIP solves the other part, how to transfer messages and assets between networks so that the transfer can be associated with instruction, verification, compliance, and destination action. This is no longer just a bridge. Bridge means transfer an asset. A new settlement rail asks, what exactly is being transferred? Who confirms the event? What action should happen on the other side? What compliance rules need to be followed? How to avoid fragmentation? How to reduce operational risk? This is where crypto begins to speak the language of institutional infrastructure. Not we have a fast bridge. And we have a layer of calculation, control, verification, and operational responsibility. ## fifth layer, custody and compliance. The mass user thinks. The main thing is that the transaction goes through. Business thinks differently. Who is responsible? Where is the custody? What rights does the operator have? What does an audit trail look like? Is it possible to stop suspicious flow? How does risk policy work? How is reconciliation done? What does accounting see? What does the regulator see? What happens when there is an error? This is why the future of financial rails will not be purely decentralized or purely banking. It will be hybrid. On-chain settlement. Off-chain identity. Smart contracts. Custody rules. Compliance engines. Risk monitoring. Human approval for major actions. Automated execution for small operations. This may sound less romantic than the old crypto dream. But this is how infrastructure becomes mature. ## main market mistake. The market often looks at the surface layer. The price has increased. The price has dropped. Token unlock. Airdrop. Narrative. Hype. But if you look deeper, the real question is different. What project reduces friction? Which layer reduces the risk? Which protocol improves UX? Which network makes execution cheaper? What standard reduces fragmentation? What infrastructure helps institutions enter without chaos? Who builds a path, and not just a car? Because it is not the loudest token that wins in the long run. The rail that other people's value starts using wins. ## Why is this important for the AI era? AI agents will not be able to live in a financial world where every step requires manual pain. If an agent needs to buy a dataset, pay for an API, perform a transaction, rebalance treasury, or close a micropayment, it needs rails. Wallet with permissions. Execution with low cost. Liquidity without unnecessary friction. Settlement between networks. Custody and compliance for business. Audit trail for people. That is, the AI economy needs not only models. It needs financial rails. Without them, the agent remains a smart observer. With them, the agent becomes a participant in the workflow. And therefore, today's crypto infrastructure may turn out to be more than just a financial toy. It can become an operating system for machine-to-machine commerce. ## Summary. The new financial rails are not one network. Not just one token. More than one wallet. This is a stack. User. Wallet. Execution. Liquidity. Settlement. Custody. Compliance. And each part must solve its own problem. Wallet should become safer and clearer. Execution should become cheaper. Liquidity must become programmable, but auditable. Settlement should become cross-chain without the chaos of wrapped assets. Custody needs to become compatible with real businesses. Compliance must be built in without turning the system into total control. This is where the real battle happens. Not just on the chart, but below the chart. In the rails along which capital, AI agents, tokenized assets, business processes, and future digital markets will move. The token price is noisy, but the infrastructure remains. And often it is the infrastructure that decides which part of the future can become real.